Your take on this exchange that Vincent Cruzet described as surreal, but still, some things were said tonight.
Yes, but last February was so disastrous that, by comparison, we're almost relieved it only went badly this time, and on a more acceptable scale. So indeed, we would have liked things to go more normally. The real question is, how do we make Trump understand that the conditions negotiated with Putin are unacceptable without Trump abandoning us and getting angry? And so, in the end, it's more of a psychological war. We let all of Trump's proven lies about the amount of money he claims to have invested in this war in Ukraine slide. So we sweep all that under the rug, we let him say whatever he wants. We wait for him to finish talking about crime in Washington and rigged elections. And then, in the end, we try to add a few touches to smooth things over. So I found that Zelensky did a pretty remarkable job psychologically. And he still managed to smile when Trump said to him, "Hey, are you going to stay a dictator like that forever, refusing elections when there's a war?" Well, for me, honestly, for now, it really could have been much worse. I was afraid it would be worse than that.
Yes, and once again, Donald Trump did not backtrack on the security guarantees he offered to Ukraine. Our journalist who was in the Oval Office, Sonia Dridi, asked a question for TF1 LCI. She asked the American president if there was any part of his meeting with Putin that he regretted. Let's listen to her question and Donald Trump's answer.
I was just telling the president, I spoke with President Putin indirectly, and we are going to have a phone conversation after these meetings today, and we might have a trilateral meeting. If we don't have a trilateral meeting, the fighting will continue, and if we do have a trilateral meeting, it is very likely that we can put an end to the war. In any case, he is waiting for my call once we finish these meetings. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Donald Trump will call Vladimir Putin after his meeting with Zelensky and with the Europeans. What forms can American security guarantees to Ukraine take if they are not sending ground troops?
There may be reassurance forces that are close to the border. There may be air defense systems that are on ships in the Black Sea positioned along the borders. From Poland, they can protect 50 to 100 kilometers into Ukrainian territory. There may be planes that are ready to take off, air patrols to intercept incoming missiles. See, for directly, and we're talking within half an hour, they will strike any Russian troops that violate the ceasefire and start coming in again. So that's without a presence on the ground, which, on the other hand, has already been mentioned as possible by 7 or 8 countries, Australia, Canada, Turkey, Europe. There are still a lot of countries involved. The Americans' proximity, even without boots on the ground, means they can still respond within half an hour if attacked.
The whole idea was this safety net, this second line of defense, because that's what guarantees those who are going to guarantee. The reassurance force that will theoretically be deployed on Ukrainian soil, far from the front lines, or even in some cases in neighboring countries, because it doesn't necessarily have to be.
The words are strong, protection similar to NATO's, and then...
A second element is the intelligence side, continuing to provide intelligence in a very intense way. Because if American equipment stops arriving, I think the Ukrainians can hold out for a few more months if they stop providing intelligence. Here we're more in a situation like what they experienced at Kursk, where in just a few days it really had direct operational implications. And the third element is logistics, ensuring operational support, the delivery of ammunition, resupply, fuel for the planes, and so on. The planes, radars, and related systems form the deployment ecosystem. In this area, Americans remain important, and we are not yet fully sovereign.
Do you really believe that Putin would finally agree to meet Zelensky and sign a capitulation on some vague piece of paper? Or then...
That Putin would accept it, yes.
No, but that Zelensky obviously...
Zelensky, the war leader, never ever. He has strong popular support. He has support that's never been higher. He has a 72% approval rating. Putin will only stop when he is stopped by us, by properly supporting Ukraine. And there is no way for Ukraine to agree to give up its territory for free. We're simply talking about a retreat, even an ideological one, of the country that has to give up territories that Russia can't take. We have an aggressor. Come on, it's subtitled. Let's use an analogy. We have a thief who goes to rob a bank. He wants to take 100 million, but he only takes 19 million. In the end, we tell him, we'll still give you 20 million since you didn't ask for 100 million.
Yes.
However, regarding Donbass, we still plan to give the missing million to the thieves, which is truly unacceptable. And why should a country that hasn't been defeated militarily have to suffer a diplomatic and political defeat? There's no reason why Putin should come out of this situation with his head held high.
From your point of view, is a peace agreement within reach? We're heading straight for it. The path is laid out.
If the condition for peace to be achieved is the cession of Ukrainian territory to Russia, Ukraine will never accept it. And if that's the condition Russia will use to claim it's rejecting peace, then obviously the war will continue. Russia's goal is still to derail this agreement in order to keep attacking, still hoping to bring about a Ukrainian collapse, which, I repeat, will never happen. Ukraine produces 55% of its frontline weapons, while the U.S. is now at 20%. Intelligence remains important, as we've discussed. But overall, you have to understand that the Ukrainians would rather lose the 20% of equipment coming from the United States than abandon the tens or hundreds of thousands of people living in the Donbass who would have to be given up. That's a human cost. Is it better to keep losing thousands of fighters? Every death is tragic. I have friends who died and others in the hospital, so I know what that means for them. But does that mean we should accept having tens of thousands of civilian deaths? Remember, everyone in the Donbass knows Izium. Izium was occupied, then liberated. There are mass graves of civilians who were tortured, who were massacred. There are children, young people who were rounded up as they left school. When the Russians withdrew during the counteroffensive at the end of 2022, all the inhabitants of Free Donbass know what it means, what Russian occupation is, so they, for one, will never accept this situation. No one in Ukraine will accept to back down.
But since we were talking about that famous map that's currently spread out on the desk, one of the desks in the Oval Office where they're discussing territory in detail, what exactly can Mr. say? Zelensky, when faced with such a trap, are you offering me Donbass to end the war or not?
Actually, I'm not even sure it's a trap. Maybe it would be an opportunity to do some explaining and show Trump, look at the Donbass, Russia, the second largest army in the world. When we go to the Donbass, people tell us, but we won, we weren't invaded. The most densely populated areas of the Donbass, Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, Lyman. These are cities with hundreds of thousands of residents that Russia can't manage to conquer. 7,000 square kilometers of the Donbass are still free today, and Russia would like to exchange them for 200 square kilometers in the Sumy area. I think if Zelensky can show him, like, this is 200 square kilometers, this is 7,000 square kilometers, it's not the same thing.
What we're learning here, Xavier Teitelman, is that apparently there are even percentages, of what has been conquered, of what has been acquired, of what would still need to be given back.
Russia conquered 4,000 square kilometers last year. That means at the current pace, and we know they're not really in a position where they can keep this up for years to come.
Ukrainian territory, specifically.
They're advancing less than 1%, having taken 4,000 square kilometers last year, which is under 1%. That means it would take them almost 2 years just to take Donetsk if they focused only on that area, which they aren't doing today. And so we know very well that Russia has no chance of holding out economically for another 2 years. And so, logically, I dare to hope that this map could actually help Zelensky by educating Trump.
So we're going to welcome a man who carries weight in this lively discussion. We're having a heavyweight, figuratively speaking. General Michel Yakovlev, former Chief of Staff at SHAPE. Ladies and gentlemen, the operational headquarters of NATO, and he is happy to join us, of course, Michel Yakovlev. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on this map that's displayed in the Oval Office, a huge map of Ukraine with everyone apparently gathered around it. Mr. Trump, President of the United States. Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, their advisor, discussing a bit of horse trading, so to speak, or maybe a territorial exchange. Tell us how it goes when you're in the military and you talk about territorial exchanges like this on paper.
Well, it happens that I was, as a soldier, involved in a negotiation over a map. At a scale of 1 to 50,000, it's still quite precise, 2 centimeters for 1 kilometer. It was about Kosovo. It was with the Americans and the British, alongside the Rambouillet negotiations, working on maps. Until now, we've left that to the military. This is the first time I've heard about Trump. So Trump, who doesn't know where Ukraine is, basically, who doesn't know that the Black Sea isn't an ocean. So he's sitting on the map, looking at the map. It's comical, absolutely comical. And the underlying problem isn't How much territory we're going to exchange or not, the underlying problem is to stop the war. Basically, on the line where it is, and after that, we can negotiate the line down to the smallest detail. As we say in the army, a little to the left, a little to the right, that's another matter. But yes, I'm even learning it. Well, when you tell me Trump is looking at a map, but it's enough to make you cry.
It's a Trump looking at a map. Michel Yakovlev, General Yakovlev, Trump is looking at a map. And it's true, you're right. By the way, it does make the people here on set smile a little. I still have to say what's happening because indeed it's quite funny. It's a politician looking at a map. And you yourself, you're in the military, and it's up to you to look into this kind of detail that matters in negotiations. To draw the ceasefire line you mentioned, that's where I'm taking you, Michel Yakovlev. Obviously, you have to add security guarantees to that. Ukraine must be allowed at some point to be strong enough to hold a ceasefire line or at least observe it. What exactly is it going to be about in detail?
So if Trump wasn't working for Putin, we would negotiate the line with Putin more or less where it is. And we would negotiate technical measures for the cessation of hostilities like we've seen with Korea, with Kosovo. There are technical measures to take. So it's very technical, it's very military. Usually politicians leave that to lower ranking military officers like I was at the time. I was a colonel and that's it, handle the details. Between you guys, for example, you declare that this is what happened on November 11, 1918 at 11 o'clock. Let me remind you, no one shoots anymore. We stopped firing on that day, at that time. We turned the tank turrets the other way, we moved them aside, we pulled back the armored vehicles and the artillery. First 5 kilometers, then 15 kilometers, then 40 kilometers, so that people are out of range. And we create contact points all along the line of contact, every 5, 10, 15 kilometers, so that with white, yellow, green, blue flags, whatever, the battalions facing each other can communicate to talk about such an incident that happened, etc. So there are lots of technical aspects. Trump showed such a lack of understanding of the subject at the strategic level that I really can't see him getting involved in the technical details. With military people like me or Xavier Teitelman, who knows exactly what I'm talking about, or Michel Goya, an expert, really, in that case, we can have a useful discussion. There's one subject where Trump is completely oblivious to the reality on the ground, and that's the Black Sea. The Ukrainians have won the battle for the Black Sea.
Even though they don't have a navy?
They don't have a navy, and the Russian navy, with its tail between its legs, is hiding in Novorossiysk and Oshkoshir in South Abkhazia.
We're going to talk about that aspect in general. We're going to talk about that aspect about the Black Sea. But I'd still like to ask a few questions because what you're saying is obviously getting a reaction here in the studio. Xavier Teitelman, you were talking about these territorial exchanges. President Zelensky is going straight for it. We are going to talk about the territories. We are going to talk about the territories. And that's when they are mentioned, the territories.
So first of all, Zelensky can't openly say no, because let's remember Trump is actually coming with 3 things. We support the Russian position of not implementing a ceasefire, we support the Russian position of not imposing sanctions, and in particular, since Friday, he has canceled the secondary sanctions that were supposed to be imposed on China. And he supports the transfer of territories from Ukraine to Russia, of areas that are not occupied, to be occupied by Russia. In return, he only got security guarantees, showing some flexibility in the demands. So we wonder, what exactly can the European Union recognize? So what do we do when it comes to Israel? When they occupy the Golan, we acknowledge the occupation of the Golan, but we do not recognize Israel's occupation of the Golan, and we do not recognize the annexation of that area. So I think Europeans and Ukrainians just need to accept the reality on the ground, which is that part of their territory is occupied. But in terms of transfer, 1 square kilometer occupied equals 1 square kilometer to be given to Russia. For example, Pokrovsk. I've been to Pokrovsk 4 times in the past year.
In southern Donetsk?
It's in ruins. Out of 60,000 inhabitants, there are 1,500 left today. Maybe it's worth offering this heap of ruins, which wouldn't be worth anything,
Allow me to interrupt you, Xavier. That's exactly the kind of thing Volodymyr Zelensky might say to Donald Trump, speaking clearly, in simple terms, basically with concrete examples.
He can't tell him that 7,000 square kilometers are worth 200 square kilometers, which he would get back. He has to say that. It's in ruins. I was in Siversk in May. Siversk, there's nothing left, just a few old people, some ruined houses. There's nothing left. Industrially, demographically, there's no one left in these cities. These cities are worthless. Everything is polluted. The fields are polluted. There are 20,000 kamikaze drones exploding every day. The fields are polluted. The land is unusable. Industry no longer exists. The cities no longer exist. The population has already left. That, eventually, if he wants to give it to Russia, while giving himself time to build defensive lines, because if he retreats to the edge of the Donbass, then it's wide open, there's no defense left. So that's not acceptable, but leaving a few towns that are in low-lying areas and are already destroyed today, maybe eventually Zelensky could propose that.
President Zelensky himself, Xavier Teitelman, talked about security guarantees. He said the first security guarantee is a strong army. He even referred to those Patriot anti-missile systems that the Americans could keep supplying. That's it. The first security guarantee for Ukraine is a strong army, armed by the Americans. You heard it right here tonight.
He said it. I'd like it to be armed, not just by the Americans. Also because we have better quality equipment, and it can be less expensive too for a large number of systems. But overall, Ukraine's primary security is having an army of 800,000 men that is capable of standing up to and holding off Russia, just as they have been doing for the past 2.5 years. And I would like to remind you that all the European armies combined do not have the manpower and defensive capability that Ukraine alone has today. So today they know very well that if there is ever a ceasefire that is unfavorable to them, and if sanctions on Russia are lifted, and if Russia is able to rearm, they know very well that if afterwards they haven't managed to regain enough strength to increase their defensive capability, at the speed at which Russia will start producing again, it's estimated that in 2 years it will be 800,000 men, 5,000 armored vehicles, 25,000 cruise missiles. Well, if the Netherlands or Ukraine or those areas on the front line do not have the means to withstand such pressure, obviously they already know they've lost.
And you also had around that table the president of Finland, who shares a border with Russia.